Picture a concert hall in 1815.
Okay.
The music is harmonious, it's structured, very polite. You have the great powers of Europe, Britain, Austria, Russia, Prussia, all sitting in the front row, just nodding along in rhythm.
Right. They've just defeated Napoleon.
Exactly. They are exhausted, and they've made a pact. No more revolutions, no more massive continent-spanning wars. They call it the Concert of Europe. And honestly, for about 50 years, it actually holds the tune.
It really did. It was a remarkable period of forced stability. They effectively put a lid on the boiling pot of European politics by agreeing that if anyone stepped out of line, the others would collectively step in to restore order.
Yeah.
It was conservative, it was monarchical, and, well, it was peaceful.
But we know how this story ends. We know that by 1914, the concert hall is on fire, the orchestra is screaming, and Europe is tearing itself apart in the trenches of World War I.
Yeah, the powder keg explodes.
Right. So the mission for today's deep dive is to figure out what happened in that messy middle period. We're pulling from AP European history materials, specifically topic 7.3, looking at the era roughly between 1815 and 1914.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go from a handshake deal for peace to the deadliest war humanity had ever seen?
To understand that crash, you really have to look at the shift in mindset. This is the era where the idealism of the early 19th century just it dies.
It evaporates.
Yeah, and it's replaced by something colder, harder, and much more effective. Realpolitik.
Realpolitik. It's a term you hear thrown around a lot in history classes, usually accompanied by a picture of a guy with a bushy mustache looking grumpy.
Very grumpy.
But let's unpack that for a second.
Yeah.
What does it actually mean in practice?
Think of it as politics based on power rather than ideals. Before this, you had conservatives trying to uphold the divine right of kings, or liberals dreaming of utopian republics.
Right. Very ideological.
Exactly. Realpolitik is the pivot where leaders stop asking, is this moral or is this traditional, and start asking, does this work?
It's the ends justify the means.
Applied directly to nation building, yes.
So we're trading in honor for efficiency. And today we're going to see how two specific men, Count Cavour in Italy and Otto von Bismarck in Germany, used this ruthlessness to redraw the map of Europe.
They completely rewrote the rules.
But before we get to the nation building, we really have to talk about the event that broke the old system, the catalyst, the Crimean War.
Right, 1853. This is where the Concert of Europe plays its final note. And what's fascinating is how petty the start of it was. You literally have a war that kills 500,000 people, starting over a set of keys.
I was looking at the notes on this before we started, and please tell me it didn't actually start over a literal set of keys.
It sounds like a bad joke, I know, but yes. It began as a squabble between Catholic monks and Orthodox monks over who had the keys to the Church of the Nativity in the Holy Land.
Wow.
France pressured the Ottoman Sultan to give the keys to the Catholics, and Russia demanded they stay with the Orthodox.
So the great powers go to war because of church keys.
Well, that was the excuse. The insight here from the sources is that the keys were just a pretext for a massive geopolitical power grab. Russia saw the Ottoman Empire as the, quote, sick man of Europe. It was crumbling.
And Russia wanted to kick the door down.
Exactly. They wanted access to warm water ports in the Black Sea and the Mediterranean.
Right, because Russia is geographically cursed with frozen northern ports. They need that southern exit for trade and for their navy to actually be relevant globally.
You hit the nail on the head. But Britain and France looked at the map and said, if Russia gets the Mediterranean, the balance of power is gone. So they prop up the dying Ottoman Empire and go to war against Russia in the Crimea.
So it wasn't about religion at all.
Not even a little. It was about checking Russian expansion.
But here's the twist that really matters for our story today. There's a missing friend in this fight, Austria.
This is the betrayal that changes everything. Austria and Russia were the conservative besties of Europe. They had literally saved each other from revolutions in the past.
Like in 1848.
Exactly. So Russia fully expected Austria to help them fight the French and British. Instead, Austria declared neutrality. They just sat it out.
That seems incredibly short-sighted. You lose your only real ally just to stay out of a fight.
It was a diplomatic disaster. Russia was humiliated, they lost the war, and they viewed Austria's neutrality as a massive stab in the back.
I mean, I would too.
Right. So Russia goes home to modernize, Britain goes home to focus on its overseas empire, and suddenly the police force of Europe, that concert we talked about, is just gone.
That's the key takeaway here, right? The great powers stop talking to each other.
They stop coordinating entirely. It creates what historians call a permissive environment, or a power vacuum.
Meaning nobody is watching the neighborhood.
Exactly. For the next 20 years, if a country wants to start a war to gain territory, none of the big neighbors are going to step in to stop it. And two countries specifically take advantage of this silence: Italy and Germany.
Let's start with Italy, because prior to this, Italy wasn't really a country. As the Austrian diplomat Metternich said, it was just a geographic expression.
It was a mess of small, bickering states. You had the Austrians controlling the really rich north, the Pope running the middle like a theocracy, and the Bourbon kings running the south.
But there was a movement bubbling up.
Yes, the Risorgimento,
Yeah.
the resurgence. And to make it happen, you needed two very different personalities. We often call them the brain and the sword.
The brain being Count Camillo di Cavour. He was the prime minister of Piedmont, Sardinia. Now, looking at his profile, this guy doesn't strike me as a romantic revolutionary waving a flag on a barricade.
Not at all. Cavour was an aristocrat, a businessman. He wanted a unified Italy, not because of some poetic destiny, but because it just made economic sense.
He wanted a bigger market.
Bigger markets, railroads, modernization. He is the classic practitioner of realpolitik. He knew Piedmont couldn't defeat the Austrian Empire alone. He needed a heavyweight fighter in his corner.
So he goes shopping for an ally and finds Napoleon III of France.
And here is the pure cynicism of realpolitik in action. In 1858, they make a secret pact. Cavour basically says to France, "Help me provoke a war with Austria so I can take northern Italy, and in exchange, I will give you nice and Savoy."
Wait, he's trading away Italian territory to get Italian territory.
It's a completely cold calculation, but it worked. They baited Austria into declaring war, the French army showed up, and the Austrians were pushed out of Lombardy.
And that sparked a chain reaction, right?
Yeah, other northern states voted to join Piedmont. That's the top-down unification, driven by diplomats and professional armies.
But then you have the wild card, the bottom-up guy, the sword, Giuseppe Garibaldi.
Garibaldi is the movie star of this era.
He really is.
He's a professional revolutionary. He wore a poncho, he was incredibly charismatic, and he led a volunteer army called the Red Shirts.
Which sounds very romantic.
Very. While Cavour was maneuvering in the north, Garibaldi sailed south to the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies with just 1,000 men.
And by all accounts, he should have been crushed. This is a ragtag group of volunteers against a professional entrenched army.
He absolutely should have been. But he was a guerrilla warfare genius, and the local peasantry hated their king. He sweeps through Sicily and marches right up the boot.
Which creates a massive headache for Cavour.
Oh, a huge one.
Right, because Cavour, the pragmatist, hates Garibaldi, the romantic. If Garibaldi marches all the way to Rome, he provokes the Pope. And if you provoke the Pope, you provoke France, who is guarding the Pope. And then the whole careful plan just falls apart.
Precisely. Cavour is panicking. He actually sends the Piedmontese army south to intercept Garibaldi. It's this incredibly tense moment in history. The meeting at Teano in 1860.
The regular army meeting the revolutionary army.
Civil war could have broken out right there on the spot.
But Garibaldi blinks. Or rather, he yields.
He sacrifices. Garibaldi realizes that a civil war would kill the dream of Italy forever. So in a moment that really defines the nation, he hands over all his conquered territory to King Victor Emmanuel II. He prioritizes the nation over his own power, and then he literally rides off into the sunset with a bag of seed corn for his farm.
That is shockingly noble for a political story in this era. So North and South are fused, and they eventually grab Rome to finish the puzzle, right?
Yes, but only because the French troops guarding Rome have to leave in 1870 to fight elsewhere, so Italy just walks in and annexes it. Boom, Italy's a nation.
It's a nation, but a fragile one. The North was rich and industrial, the South was poor and agrarian. They were united on paper, but socially they were still worlds apart.
Very true.
Which brings us to the main event. If Italian unification was a struggling startup, German unification was a hostile corporate takeover.
That is a very apt way to put it. And the CEO of that takeover is Otto von Bismarck.
The Iron Chancellor.
Yeah.
This is the guy who really defines the era. Now, he wasn't interested in German unity for the sake of warm, fuzzy feelings or brotherhood, was he?
No, not at all. Bismarck was a Prussian supremacist through and through. He wanted to unify the 39 German states, but only if Prussia ran the show.
He hated liberalism.
Despised it. He hated democracy, too. He famously told the legislature that the great questions of the time will not be resolved by speeches and majority decisions, but by iron and blood.
Iron and blood. That is such a metal quote. It sets the tone perfectly for what he's about to do. But he didn't just go out and start swinging a sword randomly. He had a very specific strategy.
The three wars.
Right. Walk us through this, because it's wild.
It is a masterclass in manipulation. Step one is finding a reason to test the military. So in 1864, the Danish War, he gets Austria, his main rival, to ally with him to beat up on Denmark over the territories of Schleswig and Holstein.
Wait, he allies with Austria? I thought Austria was the big obstacle to Prussian power.
Keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Ah,
He needed to see how the Austrian army fought, and he needed them to feel secure. But more importantly, he needed a reason to pick a fight with them later.
because step two is the Austro-Prussian War of 1866.
Exactly. He uses a dispute over those exact same Danish territories to goad Austria into war.
The ultimate backstab. And this is where everyone expected a long, drawn-out slugfest, right?
Most of Europe thought Austria would win. They were the established power. Instead, the Prussians absolutely crushed them.
How fast?
7 weeks.
7 weeks. That must have sent a shockwave through the continent.
It did. They used railroads to move troops rapidly, and they had these new needle gun rifles, which could fire much faster than the Austrian muskets. But here is the genius of Bismarck's realpolitik.
What does he do?
The Prussian king wanted to march on Vienna, parade through the streets, really humiliate the enemy.
Naturally.
Bismarck says, absolutely not. He practically begged the king, threatened to resign, and forced him to sign a lenient peace treaty. No land taken from Austria proper, no victory parade.
Why? That seems totally out of character for a guy talking about iron and blood.
Because he's looking 10 years into the future, he knew he might need Austria as an ally later. He didn't want a permanent, bitter enemy to his south. He just wanted them out of German affairs so Prussia could dominate the north.
He's clearing the board for the final boss fight.
Precisely. France.
The Franco-Prussian War. This is the one that really sets the stage for the 20th century.
The problem Bismarck faced was that the southern German states, places like Bavaria, they were Catholic and very suspicious of Protestant Prussia. They did not want to join a unified Germany.
So how do you get them on board?
Bismarck knew the only thing that would overcome that suspicion was an outside threat. He needed France to attack them.
And he engineers this with a telegram. This is the famous Ems dispatch.
Yes, it is the original fake news scandal.
I love this story.
It's crazy. The French ambassador had met with the Prussian king at a resort town called Bad Ems. It was a polite but firm disagreement about succession to the Spanish throne. The king sent a transcript of the meeting to Bismarck just to keep him in the loop.
And Bismarck gets creative.
He took his pen, crossed out the polite parts, and sharpened the language to make it sound like the king had deeply insulted the ambassador and the ambassador had insulted the king.
He literally edited the transcript to trigger a war.
He did. And then he released the edited version to the press on Bastille Day.
Oh.
He knew exactly how the French would react. The French public went ballistic. They demanded war. Napoleon III declared war on Prussia.
And to the southern German states, it looked like naked French aggression.
Exactly. They panicked, ran to Prussia for protection, and the coalition was formed.
Again, the Prussian military machine just rolls over them. They even capture Napoleon III himself. But the moment that really sticks with me is where they declare the new German Empire. They don't do it in Berlin.
No, they do it in the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles in 1871.
The absolute heart of French power and history.
It was the ultimate humiliation. It was Bismarck saying, "We are the masters of Europe now." And that moment birthed a deep, simmering desire for revenge in France, revanchism, that would completely poison relations between the two countries until 1914.
So 1871, the map is completely redrawn. Italy is a country. Germany is this massive industrial and military empire right in the center of Europe. You'd think Bismarck, having won everything, would just keep conquering.
And that's where the plot twists. Bismarck realizes that he has created a monster. A powerful Germany scares everyone.
Right, the balance of power is wrecked.
If the other powers combine, they can crush Germany. So he switches from being the attacker to the manager.
Becomes the peacemaker.
He becomes the juggler. His entire foreign policy for the next 20 years is simple. Keep France isolated. As long as France has no friends, Germany is safe.
So he builds this house of cards, this crazy web of alliances.
He creates the Triple Alliance with Austria and Italy. But the really hard part is Russia. Austria and Russia hate each other because they both want to control the Balkans.
But Bismarck somehow gets them both.
He convinces them both to ally with Germany. He creates the Three Emperors League.
It sounds exhausting.
Yeah.
He's basically telling Russia, don't worry, I'm your friend, and telling Austria, don't worry, I'm your friend, while they're pointing guns at each other.
And he codified this with the Reinsurance Treaty of 1887. It was a secret deal where Germany promised Russia, if Austria attacks you, we will stay neutral. It was the linchpin that kept Russia from allying with France.
But systems built on the genius of one man have a fatal flaw. Men eventually die or, get fired.
Enter Kaiser Wilhelm II in 1890. He's young, he's arrogant, and he has a withered arm that historians think made him deeply insecure and constantly needing to project aggression.
He wants to flex.
Yes. He looks at Bismarck, this old, cautious man juggling all these plates, and says, "We don't need this complicated web. We need clarity. We need absolute power."
So he fires him.
He fires Bismarck. Dropping the pilot, as the famous political cartoon depicted it, the mastermind is sent into retirement.
And the first thing the new leadership does.
They look at that secret reinsurance treaty with Russia and say, "This is too contradictory to our alliance with Austria. Let's just let it expire."
Oh, no. I can see exactly where this is going.
Russia panics. They feel completely isolated. And who is waiting there, desperate for a friend?
France. The one thing Bismarck spent 2 decades preventing happens almost overnight.
Instantly. By 1894, the Franco-Russian alliance is signed. Now look at the map. Germany has France on the west and Russia on the east.
The two-front war nightmare is locked in.
Exactly.
And this brings us to the final ingredient of the powder keg. We have the rigid alliances. We have the massive new weapons. Now we need the spark. The Balkans.
The powder keg of Europe. This region, places like Serbia, Bosnia, Bulgaria, was gaining independence as the Ottoman Empire collapsed. But you had two major powers staring at it hungrily.
Russia and Austria.
Right. The Congress of Berlin in 1878 had tried to fix the borders there, but it was deeply flawed. They focused entirely on the balance of power between the big nations and completely ignored the ethnic and nationalist desires of the people actually living there.
Which is a recipe for disaster.
Especially with the rivalries at play. Russia promoted pan-Slavism. They viewed themselves as the big brother to all Slavic people, especially the Serbs. They wanted to expand their influence down to the Mediterranean.
And Austria.
Austria was terrified. Austria-Hungary was a fragile, multi-ethnic empire. They had millions of Slavs inside their own borders. Czechs, Croats, Slovaks.
So if Serbia becomes a strong, independent nation,
The Slavs in Austria might say, "Hey, we want to join them." Austria viewed Serbian nationalism as an existential threat that would literally tear their empire apart.
so you have an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object.
Yeah.
And because of those rigid alliance systems, Germany is tied to Austria, France is tied to Russia. A conflict in this tiny corner of Europe isn't just a local problem anymore.
Exactly. It's like a climbing team roped together on a steep mountain. If one person slips, say, an archduke gets shot in Sarajevo, everyone gets pulled off the cliff.
It really changes how you view the success of those unification years. We look at Cavour and Bismarck as absolute geniuses. And they were. They achieved their goal.
They did.
But they did it by breaking the trust that held the concert of Europe together.
They replaced consensus with coercion. Bismarck's system worked brilliantly, but only as long as there was a Bismarck to run it. Once you replace the genius with a reckless leader like Wilhelm II, the rigid alliances didn't prevent war. They guaranteed that the war would be total.
It's a sobering thought. We often praise leaders who get things done, who are decisive and ruthless, who redraw maps and just ignore the rules. Cavour and Bismarck are legends for a reason.
They are. But the world they built didn't lead to stability. It led straight to the trenches.
And that is the true tragedy of realpolitik. Here is a final thought for you to chew on as you go about your day. We live in a world that is pretty obsessed with smart foreign policy and strategic maneuvering. But if a political system is built entirely on manipulation, secret treaties, and the brilliance of one or two masterminds, can it ever essentially be stable? Or is it destined to collapse the moment the smartest guy in the room walks out the door?
That is the dangerous gamble of relying on personality over principle.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll catch you on the next one.
Goodbye.